Welcome to Global Morning.
The death toll from flooding.
Most time our politicians just bring in policies too, for sure.
Incidentally, we have several more stories.
The legislature was carefully crafted to
22.2% inflation rates as of April this year. What does that say about where we are as a country?
I think Nigeria has resorted to being resilient.
Before you call a police station, before they even leave, they'll take permission from.
I don't think there's really anything on ground to improve.
We struggled as to strike.
The Minister of Education volunteered and said, give me 2 weeks.
It was a lie. The president never gave me any deadline.
I'm joined by my guest this morning to help us find some context and perspectives as far as this discussion about tax waiver and then how that differs in any way from concession is concerned. Haruna Brimo is a public affairs commentator. Thank you, Brimo, for coming to do this with us this morning.
Always my pleasure to be with you.
Great. I mean, you and I have had to talk about the economy and business and in between some politics here. Yeah. But the issue of tax waivers has not only been controversial over time, it has also been politicized for the most part. Whether you're talking about the Obasanjo days, the Jonathan days, the Buhari days, and now we have President Bola Tinubu in power. Why does it have to become a problem at some point?
I think basically because of the low level of knowledge of what tax is embedded with among the Nigerians and how we have perceived a whole lot of fiscal policy measures of government over the time, because there are some things that are not supposed to be driving, creating confusion in the system. Point of note, this is not, this is tax concession. And it's quite different from the fiscal policy measures taken so far to create tax incentives, which I've discussed on this program before.
Right.
This one is talking about how do we give a grace period to tax defaulters who have been owing the federal government for a very long time. And this money, as of September 2019, the total tax liability owed to the federal revenue was already standing at 250-something billion 5 years ago. Just opposite to this period, we should be talking of maybe almost $1 trillion. And that is even limited to federal inland revenue. Remember, the federal inland revenue is limited to collecting taxes within the base and threshold of the federal structure. Taxes that are structured at the federal level, like the company income tax and value-added tax, withholding taxes that has to do with federal. We also have withholding taxes that have to do with states. So you cannot imagine across the 36 states plus FCT, the level of the tax, the total volume of tax default or tax liabilities that are accruable or payable to the respective IROS, Inland Revenue Services of the states.
So at that point, we're talking about
one that is also liabilities to the as levies to the several orders of the 4 local government. We are just talking of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. You understand? And this liability has been on for years. And we're talking of reinflating an economy that is almost recessing. How do we reinflate the system? We are looking for money here and there. We need revenue to revamp an economy that is almost at stagflation. So the government is looking at almost everywhere. As you are looking for foreign investors, you are opening up the sectors like the oil sector, the mining sector, and everything. You also look at your tax base. And we have one of the lowest tax bases in Africa. Our tax rates are among the minimal, the most minimal in Africa, and we are also not paying taxes. Even as companies, this huge amount I'm talking about right now is owed by mainly companies. They are not personal income taxes rather. They are withholding taxes, VAT, and related taxes that are collectible within the scope activities of the Federal Inland Revenue. And remember, under the Federal Inland Revenue Act of 2004, it is well provided for them how to administer tax defaults, tax liabilities, tax defaulters, and tax liabilities like this. And what gives rise to this default at times? Most of them is caused by tax avoidance and tax evasion. One is legal. The tax avoidance aspect has legal donation where you can benefit, create reliefs to reduce your tax liability. But if those reliefs are not captured within the acts, within the tax laws, it becomes a criminal offense. But if they are captured, no problem. But the tax evasion is where you now deliberately reduce or don't want to pay, reduce your tax liability, the tax liability of a company. You want to pay less. And sometimes the assessment are done, you don't file your tax return. This was all give rise, you don't file your annual return for them to know. And remember, there's also a law, a tax law, that empowers the tax authority to use what is called BOJ, best of judgment, as a yardstick to measure your tax liability when you don't file. If you file your annual return, file your financial statement as I went due. For example, now every 31st January of the previous year on preceding year basis, every company ought to have filed. You have your auditors or your tax consultant, they help you to file so that they can raise, the tax authority will raise assessment on your financial statement to know how much you are accessible to pay tax liability. Then you do your tax computation, arrive at your chargeable profit, accessible profit, and tax payable, and you pay. But most of the time, we don't do this. So penalties arise. It is the penalty now, penalties and interest that arise from such defaults that the Federal Inland Revenue is now creating a window for you, for these tax defaulters, that between this period and this period, we are going to waive the penalties and interest of your tax liability, the taxes you are owing the federal government or the Nigerian state. And this tax, the rate of penalties and interest is well also captured. If you look at the Act of Federal Inland Revenue Act of 2004, amended 2007 and 2014, section 42, 32, and 27, everything is well explained on how to administer it. As of 2014, it was reduced, the rate was reduced to 10% and 15% respectively for both penalties and interest, using the prevailing interest rate of CBN to drive the interest. If I'm owing 2 million in taxes or I'm defaulting in paying annually, they have to compound it by 10% or the prevailing interest rate as set by the central bank. It's money that belongs to federal government. It's like somebody loan you money and you are calculating interest upon it. But penalty for defaulting, that one is determined by the Federal Inland Revenue.
I want to talk to you about something. Is it possible, I mean, is it logical enough to say that government is desperate now? Because this appears to be like a knee-jerk approach to taxation, or if you like, tax drive.
No, I disagree with that. Government is even encouraging you. What if government has gone all out to begin to arrest these tax defaulters? It's a criminal offense.
So why are we not triggering that part of the law?
It's been there, and it's been at every point in time. You see the Federal Revenue going all out for tax recovery
to seal businesses. But is that enough? Is that far-reaching enough?
It's not far-reaching until we begin to prosecute tax defaulters, deliberate, especially under tax evasion, because you have to investigate if actually what led to this default, right? What led to these liabilities. It's all criminal offense. I'm asking, but the fact that federal government is now saying that we are encouraging you, we are removing the interest and penalties. Right. Come and pay the principal that you have been owing.
And you have a time window. You have a time window for that.
Exactly. Everything has to carry a window, a time frame. So imagine you'll be owing federal government tax for 10 years, compounded annually, and you are in business. You don't pay tax.
But what was the government doing for 1 decade? I mean, an entire 10-year period, for example.
A lot happens, because that is another discussion for another day, where we now have to look at the total general tax administration and the administrators. What is their role? Are they doing it well? It's like talking about EFCC and how they work on corruption. Are they effective? So what government is now doing is, let's not go back and begin to drag ourselves. Let us waive all the accumulated interest and penalty accruing to these liabilities, so that defaulters can willingly enjoy the window. The window is an opportunity given to you. If I'm owing the federal government, or I'm owing anybody like 10 million naira, after compounded interest annually for 10 years, the 10 million now becomes 50 million or 60 million. and all of a sudden the lender is not telling me, or the person I'm owing is not telling me to come forget about the 40 million or 50 million. I should just come and pay the original capital, the principal amount of 10 million. Is that not an enough window for me? That is what the federal government is trying to do. And that's what the federal government is talking about.
Just a while ago, you said, during your opening remark, you said that the real issue we're dealing with here is inadequate education or enlightenment,
of course,
particularly on the part of members of the public.
Yes.
But if you look at page 13 of the Punch newspaper today, it says NPA blames concession for $853 million, 1.8 billion naira revenue shortfall. There are also agencies of the government that are not comfortable with this kind of concession, tax waiver, tax break.
What the discourse is limited. The topic of discussion is limited to this window created for tax defaulters to come and pay up their tax liabilities. You understand? Concession generally on its own is a topic we need to touch as it affects the rest, because NPA is complaining because they are revenue generating agency.
Right.
But at the same time, you cannot continue to impose levies and all form of payments in the name of generating revenue and killing the economy on the other hand. You can only, NPA will function properly when the economy is booming. But when your programs and policies is shrinking the economy, what are you going to be using? What is NPA going to be doing? Where are they going to be getting the revenue from? Nigeria Port Authority. What goes on in port? Containers, import of influx of import and export trading activities. That's what goes on in the port. It's a transitive point where containers go out of Nigeria and container comes into Nigeria. If the economy is not well organized, if the economy is not well lubricated, that is what the government is trying to do. So that you will, on the short run, it may have effect in your revenue, but when the economy booms, when it's well lubricated, on the long run, you will have need. You will now begin to see the repercussion positively, generating more and more revenue. Because the economy must have opened up, you will have more import and export activity going on in the port, and you will have access to more revenue generation.
All right, we're just going to take a short break quickly, everyone. When we return, Brimo and I will continue this conversation for a few more minutes. Do stay with us. So I was just going to ask you the last question. When Dr. Olayemi Kadoso, the CBN governor, was being screened by the Senate, Comrade Adams Oshomole stood up and he said something very incisive. And he said, I mean, by way of advising the CBN governor, that look, you've got to be very, if you like, circumspect with multilateral institutions like the World Bank and IMF. Let's talk about IMF in particular. We're seeing that institution, if you like, intervene or interfere most times where tax issues in Nigeria are being discussed. Talk to us about the implications of this sort of interference.
Ordinarily, the Bretwood or the Paris Club, or if you like, call it World Bank or IMF, these are multilateral institutions that intervenes in economies of member countries, especially in the third world countries, trying to drive a stimulative influence. And remember, when they are lending you money, some of the conditions attached is for them to be able to know the kind of policy direction your government or your economy is driving, so that they will be assured of getting their money back. You understand? Over the years, we've been puppets economically in the hands of this multilateral financial institution, whereby they only dole out money to us. They don't actually get involved in how this money, or they don't know how this money is spent, except to just bring your documents, put all the grammar there, what you want to use the money for, and they are sure what give them the guarantee. They look at your oil, your production capacity, the current price of your oil, and if it's not there, they look at your tax regime. How well are you going to generate enough revenue to be repaying their interest? They are not even looking at the capital, or the principal rather. They always talk about their interest. That is why the last administration of President Muhammadu Buhari had to drive what I call a deliberate shift. It was more or less shifty to the east, shifty to China. We were all in this same country, we were complaining. China this, China that, because in that arrangement, they don't have to give you the money. You choose the project, explain to them the socio-economic viability of that project to your people and to them, and they will come and put the project. If it's rail transport, their own is give us whatever you want, give us the template, we'll come and deliver the rail and debit your account with the total cost of building your rail system for you. And we'll be managing it for some time to be able to make it more okay to get our money back. You understand? Even under the Belt and Road Initiative. But unlike the IMF, you cannot rule that part away. And theirs is just bank, just like any other bank. When they give you money, all they expect is the document to show that you are viable enough to pay them back their interest. So what do they look out for? Oil prices and your tax system. What are your tax regime policies? How best are you working to get enough revenue so that they will be sure? Look at our budget. We are so sure of paying. Look at how much we are going to use to satisfy or to finance our foreign debt. You understand? Financing it does not mean we are paying the principal. It simply means how much we are going to be using to paying as interest to the foreign donors. Where is the money going to come from? It's through taxes and other sources of revenue like oil and all that. So you cannot rule it out as far as we are developing economy until we all sit down to say, let us deliberately do away with those things that we have the capacity to produce. And deliberately in the sense that we must understand that such action will have a far-reaching hardship for some period.
For short term.
For a short term. But do we have the capacity to bear short term? At a time, in this country, people were crying just because former President Buhari said there should be restriction, import restriction on some essential goods that Nigeria can produce to reduce the outlays of our FS. You understand? We were already crying and said, bring back our corruption. That is the kind of system we are talking about. Which also takes you back to the level of education. But
would you blame the people when these are the same people who for decades have seen government come with insincerity
then
of purpose?
We are not ready to shift.
Again and again. Was the government convincing them? Was the government able to persuade them?
Patriotism is not predicated upon what you expect from government.
But those in government most times are not patriotic. We talk about leadership by example.
We keep driving it from up to down. The leaders you are having in government were followers like me and you. So they are not patriotism started as followers. If you are a bad follower, you are going to be a bad leader. You can't give what you don't have. No Nigerian president today that was not in the streets or in the trenches like me and you. They've all worked in establishment as staff. They've all purchased one or two things in the market. They've driven in the regular roads. They've suffered the social infrastructure deficit. Some of them, at one way or the other, even in their families today, they all suffer from the multidimensional poverty index. that is eating up the system today. But because they were bad followers, you don't expect them to be good leaders.
Okay, I'm afraid...
I think I have to re-emphasize again, and I keep saying it here, that federalism is bottom up, not up bottom.
But again, the subject of federalism is probably something we are going to have another day.
Yes, I'm going to, because there is need for it.
Yes, there is.
In your state, for example, in the past 8 years, Edo State, no local government have right to a federal allocation.
But
the money is warehoused by the state.
Is that exclusive to Edo State?
No, most of the state, I'm going to be using our state because I belong to the same state. Why should I be talking about Kogi when I have a bad example I'm dealing with? There's what is called JAC, Joint Account Committee they create.
That's right.
To warehouse 18 local government funds. All you now do is to pay the local government caretaker, chairman or whatever chairman, you give him stipend of 10 million as his money, pay the regular worker salary, then you cannot provide markets, local government road, which is Trunk C Road, basic infrastructure, maternity, health center, primary health care, you cannot deliver across states because the local government are dead. So until all these things need to be checked. Here we are deliberating on FRS created tax window to receive liabilities owing the system. But nobody talking of the states.
Okay, I think we're going to get to the subnationals one of these days real soon. Haruna Brimo, thank you for coming this morning on the program.
Always my pleasure.
We do wish you the best of the weekend. We're taking a break now. When we return, I'll be joined by Dr. Babayo Sule as a senior lecturer at the Federal University of Keshere in Gombe State. Do stay with us.